My children told me my dementia was getting worse. I nodded, smiled, even apologized, while a recorder no bigger than a sugar cube sat hidden inside my teacup saucer, capturing every word they said. For 6 months, I let them believe I was slipping, forgetting names, losing track of time, confusing days, because the truth was far more dangerous than anything they accused me of. I wasn't losing my mind. I was watching them build a case against me. And by the time they realized I knew exactly what they were doing, it was already too late. Hello, my dears. Grace here. Now listen carefully. When your own children start speaking to you like you're already gone, something is very wrong. I've seen this before, and it never starts loudly. It starts soft, polite, calculated. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt someone slowly taking control of your life? I'm Evelyn Mara Kestrel, 77 years old, and until recently, I would have told you my life was quiet in the kindest way. I live in a narrow brick house on Alderwick Lane in Greywick, the kind of street where people still wave but rarely stop. My husband Orson built half the shelves in this house himself. Oak, sanded by hand, finished with a smell I can still recognize if I close my eyes long enough. He's been gone 11 years now, and the silence he left behind settled into the walls like dust. That morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen, heating water in my old cobalt kettle, the one that whistles slightly off-key, like it's trying to remember the tune but never quite gets there. I had just set out 2 cups when I heard the front door open without knocking. Darren never knocks anymore. Mom? His voice came sharp, but coated in concern, the kind that feels practiced if you listen closely enough. You left the door unlocked again. I hadn't. I must have forgotten, I said softly, placing the cups down. I let my hand linger just a second longer than necessary, as if I needed to steady myself. Maris followed behind him, already watching me like I was a puzzle she had half solved. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she glanced around the kitchen, scanning surfaces. Counter, stove, sink, like she was checking for evidence. You made tea? She asked. Yes, chamomile, I said. She exchanged a quick look with Darren. That look, I would come to recognize it well. Mom, Darren sighed, sitting down heavily. You told us yesterday you stopped drinking chamomile because it makes you dizzy. I paused, just enough. Oh, did I? You did, Maris said quickly, stepping in before I could continue. That's what we're worried about. These little things, they're happening more often. There it was, gentle, careful, documented. I lowered myself into the chair across from them, making sure my movements were just slightly slower than usual. My fingers brushed against the underside of the saucer. The recorder was already on. I suppose I've been a bit forgetful, I admitted. Darren leaned forward immediately, relief flashing across his face before he masked it. That's okay, Mom. That's why we're here. We just want to help you. Help. I had spent 43 years in this house, paid every bill, filed every tax return, managed every repair down to the last cracked tile in the bathroom. I still kept a ledger, paper, not digital, where every dollar had a place and a purpose. Orson used to joke that if the banks ever collapsed, I'd be the one they came to for records. And yet, here they were, speaking to me like I couldn't remember how to boil water. Maris finally sat down, folding her hands neatly. We think it might be time to consider some adjustments. What kind of adjustments? I asked. Darren reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. Not thick, but organized. Tabs. Labels. I noticed the top corner immediately, my name, typed cleanly. Evelyn M. Kestrel. Care Overview. Care. We've been keeping track, he said carefully. Just small things. Missed appointments, bills paid late, that incident with the stove last week. The stove. I looked up, genuinely curious which version of reality he planned to present. You left it on, Mom. Maris found it. Maris nodded. It could have been dangerous. I folded my hands in my lap. I see. Because that was the moment I knew, not suspected, not wondered, knew. I hadn't cooked that day. I had eaten cold ricotta on toast with a drizzle of honey and a pinch of crushed pistachio, my little indulgence. The stove hadn't been touched, which meant one thing. They weren't reacting to my decline, they were creating it. I looked at them, my children, and for the first time, I didn't see worry. I saw strategy. And so I smiled. Well, I said gently, lowering my eyes as if embarrassed. I suppose I'll have to start writing more things down. Darren relaxed. Maris exhaled quietly. They thought I was slipping. They thought I was easy. They thought they had time. What they didn't know was that this conversation, this folder, this careful performance was already recorded, dated, and stored. And it was only the beginning. After they left, the house didn't feel quiet the way it used to. It felt staged, like someone had moved the furniture half an inch while I wasn't looking and expected me not to notice. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, listening. The kettle had long since cooled, the faint metallic tick fading into nothing. Then I walked slowly, deliberately slowly, into the hallway where Darren had installed that new camera. A sleek little thing, black, polished, angled just slightly too far inward, not toward the door, toward me. I paused beneath it and tilted my head like I was trying to remember something. Let it see hesitation. Let it record confusion. Then I moved on. By the time I reached the living room, I had already decided something important. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. People reveal more when they believe they're winning. I lowered myself into Orson's old armchair, the one with the worn velvet arms and the faint smell of pipe tobacco that never quite left, and pulled out my notebook from the side drawer. Lavender cover. Thick paper. My handwriting still neat, still steady. Day 1, I wrote. Darren claims stove incident. False. Both observing environment. Coordinated. I paused, tapping the pen once against the page. Then I added, they are building something. The word case stayed in my mind, but I didn't write it yet. Writing it would make it too real too soon. Instead, I closed the notebook and reached for the small recorder. I replayed the conversation just a few seconds. Darren's voice filled the room, calm and reasonable on the surface. That's what we're worried about. These little things. Little things. Carefully chosen. Soft enough to sound harmless, heavy enough to stack over time. I turned it off. That afternoon, I decided to test them. I moved my glasses. Not far, just from the side table to the kitchen drawer beneath the cutlery tray, tucked beside the spoons. Somewhere I would never normally put them. Then I waited. Darren came back before evening. Too soon for coincidence. Mom, have you seen your glasses? He asked, already stepping inside like he owned the question. I blinked at him from the armchair. My glasses? Yes, he said, scanning the room. You had them this morning. I'm not sure, I murmured. Maris arrived 10 minutes later. Again, too fast. She didn't greet me this time. She went straight to the kitchen. Drawers opened, closed, opened again. Then her voice, sharper than before. Darren. He joined her. A pause. And then, quiet enough that they thought I couldn't hear. This is what I meant. She's putting things in places that don't make sense. I kept my eyes on the television, though it wasn't on. She probably doesn't even remember doing it, Darren replied. Another pause. Lower this time. We need to move faster. Silence settled after that, but it wasn't empty. It was full of decisions being made without me. I felt something cold slip into place inside my chest. Not fear, not anger. Clarity. That evening, after they left again, I didn't sit in the armchair. I went upstairs. Orson's study was exactly as he'd left it. Orderly, deliberate, untouched by trends or time. The shelves still held his old legal binders, his fountain pens, even that ridiculous paperweight shaped like a brass astrolabe he insisted made him think better. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and took out the lockbox. Inside were documents I hadn't needed in years. Insurance papers, property deeds, copies of wills, names, numbers, and one business card. Harlan Beckett. I ran my thumb over the embossed letters. The edges were worn, but the name was still clear. Harlan didn't like games. He liked facts. Good, I thought, because facts were exactly what I was collecting. I closed the box, slower this time, more careful. Then I walked to the window and looked out at Alderwick Lane. Mrs. Delaney across the street was watering her hydrangeas, humming something soft and tuneless. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But inside this house, something had already shifted. They thought I was slipping, so I would let them. For as long as it took. The appointment was supposed to be at 11. That's what Darren told me over the phone the night before, his voice unusually careful, like each word had been placed on a scale before he let it out. Just a routine check, Mom. Nothing serious. We want to make sure everything's stable. Stable. I repeated the word to myself after the call ended, letting it sit in my mouth like something slightly bitter. Then I wrote it down in the lavender ledger. Day 3. Routine check. Tone rehearsed, intent unclear. That morning, I dressed slower than usual. A soft gray cardigan, pearl buttons, navy skirt. I brushed my hair twice, then once more, letting the strands fall just a little uneven near the temple. Subtle, not careless. Just enough. When Darren arrived, he didn't comment on my appearance. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't here to observe me. He was here to present me. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. Darren usually filled silence with small talk, weather, traffic, something about work. But that day, his hands stayed tight on the wheel, his jaw set just a little firmer than normal. I watched the road signs. We weren't heading toward my usual clinic. Darren, I said softly, this isn't Dr. Henley's office. He didn't look at me. No, Mom. We thought it might be better to get a more specialized opinion. Specialized. Another word carefully chosen. I nodded slowly, as if processing something difficult. Oh, I see. He relaxed just a fraction. We pulled into a low, modern building with too much glass and not enough warmth. Clean lines, neutral colors, the kind of place designed to feel reassuring, but somehow manages to feel hollow instead. The sign near the entrance read, Graywick Cognitive and Memory Center. There it was. Not a checkup, an evaluation. Maris was already waiting inside. Of course she was. She stood when she saw us, offering me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hi, Mom. Hello, dear. Her hand lingered on my arm a second longer than necessary, as if guiding me, but also positioning me. We didn't sit in the main waiting area. Instead, Maris led me straight down a corridor into a smaller room. A man stood by the desk, tall, mid-50s, silver at the temples, eyes sharp in a way that suggested he noticed more than he said. "Mrs. Kestrel," he greeted, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Soren Vale." His grip was firm, professional, neutral. I liked him immediately. "This won't take long," Maris said quickly, already placing a folder on the desk. I caught a glimpse of it as she opened it. Tabs, notes, dates, prepared. Darren stood near the door, arms crossed loosely, watching me the way one watches something fragile or unpredictable. Dr. Vale gestured for me to sit. "We're just going to go through a few questions, Mrs. Kestrel. Nothing to worry about." I smiled faintly. "At my age, doctor, everything is something to worry about." A small pause. Then just the slightest curve at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough," he said. The questions began simply. Names, dates, current events. I answered most of them correctly, but not all. I let a few slip, deliberately. "What day is it today?" he asked. "Thursday," I said. It was Wednesday. I watched Maris from the corner of my eye. She wrote something down immediately. Good. We moved on. "Can you tell me what you had for breakfast?" I hesitated, counted 3 seconds. "Toast," I said. "And tea." True enough. Just incomplete. Darren shifted slightly, satisfied. The test continued. Patterns, memory recall, simple problem solving. I gave them exactly what they needed. Not too sharp, not too lost. Just slipping. By the end, Maris looked almost relieved. Darren looked certain. Dr. Vale, however, looked thoughtful. That was the only thing that mattered. When it was over, Maris stood quickly. "Thank you, doctor. We really appreciate your time." "Of course," he replied, though his eyes were still on me. Darren stepped forward. "We just want to make sure she's safe." Safe. Always that word. Dr. Vale nodded. "I understand." There was a pause. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Kestrel, would you mind stepping out with me for just a moment? I'd like to go over 1 or 2 things privately." Maris opened her mouth, but Darren touched her arm lightly. "Of course," he said. We stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind us. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Dr. Vale looked at me. Not like I was fragile, not like I was fading, like I was present. "Do you feel safe at home?" he asked quietly. There it was. Not, "Are you confused?" Not, "Do you forget things?" Safe. I met his eyes. Carefully. "I'm beginning," I said slowly, "to wonder if I should." Something shifted in his expression. Not alarm. Not yet. Recognition. He reached into his pocket and slipped me a card. Quick. Subtle. "They won't see this," he said under his breath. "Call me if you need to." Footsteps behind the door. We stepped apart just as it opened. Maris smiled again. Darren nodded. Everything looked normal. But as we walked back through that glass building, one thing had changed. I wasn't alone anymore. When we got back into the car, Darren didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, fingers resting on the wheel, staring ahead like he was waiting for something to settle. "Well," he said finally, "that went about how I expected." I turned my head slowly toward him. "Did it?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You struggled a bit, Mom. It's okay. That's why we did this." Struggled. I lowered my gaze to my hands. Let them rest there. Still. Obedient. "Yes," I murmured. "I suppose I did." He nodded once, satisfied, and started the car. Maris followed us home in her own vehicle. Of course she did. They never left anything to chance anymore. 2 cars, Two witnesses, two versions of concern reinforcing each other until it sounded like truth. Back at the house, Darren insisted on walking me inside. "Just to make sure everything's all right," he said. Everything. He moved through the room slowly, not obviously searching, but not searching either. His eyes lingered too long on surfaces, corners, drawers. When he passed Orson's study, he paused. "Have you been going in there much?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said. "It helps me think." He gave a short nod. "You shouldn't overexert yourself." Overexert. Thinking, apparently, had become a risk. Maris joined us in the kitchen, already pulling something from her bag. "We brought some forms," she said lightly. "Nothing complicated, just temporary arrangements. So Darren can help manage things while we figure out what's best." There it was again. Help. Manage. Best. I watched as she laid the papers on the table, neatly aligned. Edges squared, prepared long before today. I didn't need to read them to know what they were, but I did anyway, slowly, letting my eyes move across the page like I was struggling to keep up. Durable power of attorney, limited financial oversight, medical authorization. Each phrase colder than the last. "Just until things stabilize," Darren added, leaning casually against the counter. "It's not permanent." Not permanent. Nothing ever is when someone else holds the pen. I traced a finger along the margin as if trying to understand. "And this lets you pay my bills?" "Yes," Maris said quickly, "and make sure nothing falls through the cracks." Nothing. Except me, I thought. I looked up at them. Two faces, familiar, distant, strangers wearing my children's expressions. "My hand's been a bit unsteady lately," I said softly, lifting it just enough for the slightest tremor to show. "I wouldn't want to sign something important like this and make a mistake." Darren stepped forward immediately. "We can help you." "Just take your time." "No," I said gently, pulling my hand back. "I think I should wait." Maris's smile tightened. "Wait for what?" "For a better day," I replied. "When I'm clearer." There was a pause, a thin one, the kind that stretches just enough to reveal irritation underneath. Darren exhaled slowly, nodding like he understood. "Okay, that's fine. We don't want to pressure you." Pressure. I almost smiled. Maris gathered the papers, but not fully. She left them there, just slightly turned toward me. A reminder, a presence. "We'll come back tomorrow," she said, "just to check in." Of course you will, I thought. They always come back when they think the door is almost open. After they left, the house settled again, but not into silence, into awareness. I walked back to the kitchen table and sat down where the papers still lay. The top page had shifted slightly, revealing a signature line. My name. Waiting. I reached out, and instead of moving it aside, I turned the page over. And that's when I saw it. A small indentation beneath the paper. Faint. Almost invisible unless you knew how to look. But I did. Orson had taught me that trick years ago when we used to review contracts together. Pressure leaves memory. I went to the drawer, pulled out a soft graphite pencil, and shaded lightly over the surface. Words began to appear, not mine, Darren's handwriting, notes written while the paper had been on top. Doctor supports decline. Need signature ASAP. House transfer after POA. I stopped. The pencil hovered in my hand. House transfer. So that was it. Not concern, not safety. Ownership. I set the pencil down carefully and leaned back in the chair. For a moment I let myself feel it. Not the anger. Not yet. The clarity. Everything was aligning now. The doctor, the forms, the rehearsed conversations, the staged forgetfulness. They weren't waiting for me to fail. They were building proof that I already had. And then they would take everything. I looked at the papers one last time. Then I reached for the recorder. Clicked it on, placed it gently beside the stack, and said softly into the empty room, "Let's see how far you're willing to go." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. There's a difference. Sleep, at my age, is something you learn to respect. You don't waste it. But that night, I chose awareness over rest. I sat in Orson's study with a small lamp on, the kind that casts a tight circle of light and leaves the rest of the room in shadow. It helped me think. On the desk in front of me, the recorder, my lavender ledger and Darren's little masterpiece, the documents he thought would quietly hand him my life. I replayed the audio again. Need signature ASAP. Not even subtle. I wrote it down carefully, underlined twice. They are accelerating. That word mattered, because when people rush, they make mistakes. Around 3 a.m, I opened the lockbox again and took out Harlan Beckett's card. I stared at it for a long time before dialing. I didn't expect him to answer. He did. "Beckett?" came a rough voice, half asleep but alert underneath. "Harlan," I said. "It's Evelyn Kestrel." A pause. Then something shifted in his tone. "Evelyn. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Everything all right?" "No," I said simply. "It isn't." Silence again. Not empty this time. Focused. "Talk." I didn't dramatize it, didn't exaggerate. I laid it out exactly as it was. The conversations, the staged incidents, the forms, the notes under the paper, the doctor visit. When I mentioned the recordings, he interrupted me. "You recorded them?" "Yes." "Good," he said immediately. No hesitation. "Very good." That told me everything about where this was going. "They're building toward guardianship," he continued, "or full control through power of attorney first, then escalation. Happens more than people think." My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. "And if I had signed?" "You'd already be losing control," he said bluntly. "Financial first, then medical, then residence. They'd move you into care, sell the house, consolidate assets. Just like that. Clean. Efficient. Final." I looked around Orson's study, the shelves, the desk, the quiet weight of a life built piece by piece, and felt something settle deeper inside me. Resolve. "What do I do?" I asked. There was a soft exhale on the other end. Not tired, calculating. "You don't confront them," Harlan said. "Not yet. You let them continue. Let them talk. Let them commit." "I've been doing that." "Good. Then we keep going. You document everything. Dates, times, exact wording. Save copies of anything they give you. And Evelyn, listen carefully. Don't show them you understand the legal language. Not even a hint." "I won't." "And the doctor?" "Dr. Vale?" Another pause. "If he asked whether you feel safe, he's already suspicious. That's useful. Keep him in your corner, but don't trigger anything official too early. We want them confident." Confident. That word again. "I understand," I said. "One more thing," Harlan added, his voice lower now. "Do you have anyone in the family who's not aligned with them?" I thought immediately of Willa. "My granddaughter," I said. "She sees more than she says." "Good. Don't involve her yet. But keep her close. You'll need a clean witness when this breaks." "When? Not if." We ended the call shortly after that. No reassurances, no false comfort, just clarity and direction. Exactly what I needed. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had changed. Toast, a bit of ricotta, a drizzle of honey again. Consistency matters when someone is watching patterns. At 10:30, right on time, Darren walked in. No knock. "Morning, Mom," he said, scanning the room. "Good morning, dear." He noticed the papers immediately. Of course he did. They were exactly where he left them. "Did you have a chance to look them over?" he asked casually. I hesitated. Just enough. "I tried," I said, pressing my fingers lightly to my temple. "But some of the wording, it's a bit much for me." His shoulders dropped slightly. Relief. "There's nothing complicated in there," he said. "I can walk you through it." "I'd appreciate that," I murmured. Maris arrived 5 minutes later. Again, precise. Again, coordinated. They sat across from me like yesterday never ended, like we had simply paused the conversation overnight. Darren began explaining the documents, line by line, simplifying where it suited him, skipping where it didn't. I watched him closely, not his words, but his confidence. He believed this was already done. Maris leaned forward at one point, her voice softer. "Mom, we're just trying to make things easier for you. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." Anything. That word again. I looked at her, really looked this time, and for just a second, one brief, flickering second, I saw it. Not concern, not care, expectation. She wasn't hoping I would agree. She was waiting for it. Now look at this moment. They're sitting there, calm, polite, explaining how they'll take control of everything and expecting her to say yes. That quiet confidence? That's the dangerous part. Tell me honestly, if you were in Evelyn's place right now, would you sign just to keep the peace? I wouldn't. I lowered my eyes again, letting my voice soften. "I just need a little more time," I said. Darren smiled. Maris nodded. They thought I was almost there. And I let them. Because the closer they believed they were to winning, the more they would reveal. From that point on, I became someone else in my own house. Not entirely, just enough. I slowed down my speech by a second or two. I repeated small things, asked for clarification where I normally wouldn't. I let silences linger just a little too long before answering. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that could be pointed to as proof on its own. But together, it painted a picture. Exactly the one they wanted to see. And because of that, they relaxed. That was the first mistake. Darren started coming by more often. Not every day, but enough to feel constant. Always with a reason. Checking the mail, reviewing bills, making sure I'd taken my medication. He even brought over a pill organizer one afternoon, bright plastic, labeled with the days of the week in oversized letters. "For clarity," he said. I thanked him. Then I quietly photographed every compartment before and after he touched it. 3 days later, I found Tuesday and Wednesday switched. I didn't say a word, just wrote it down. Medication tampering, subtle, intent, confusion reinforcement. Maris took a different approach. She brought things. Food, mostly. Things I used to make myself. Pear galette, saffron rice pudding, even my own lentil stew recipe, though hers was too salty. She'd set them down gently, smile, and then casually mention how difficult it must be for me to keep up with cooking. "You don't have to push yourself, Mom," she said once, placing a container in my fridge. "We can take care of these things now." Take care. Always the same phrasing. I let her. But I also noticed something else. She wasn't just watching me anymore. She was measuring. The distance between the table and the wall, the size of the cabinets, the condition of the flooring near the back door. Once, I caught her opening the lower cupboards, running her fingers along the wood like she was testing it. "Just checking for water damage," she said when she noticed me. "Of course you are," I thought. That evening, Darren brought someone new. "Mom, this is Lynette," he said, stepping aside as a tall woman entered behind him. Sharp posture, clean lines. Everything about her looked deliberate, from the tailored coat to the way her eyes moved across the room. She didn't smile immediately. She assessed. "Mrs. Kestrel," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard a lot about you." "I hope only the good parts," I replied. A pause, then a small smile. Controlled. "Of course." She didn't sit right away. Instead, she walked slowly through the living room, her gaze moving over the furniture, the shelves, the small details most people ignore. "This is a beautiful home," she said. "It's been lived in," I answered. "That's what makes it valuable." There it was, not warm, not sentimental, practical. I watched Darren carefully. He didn't react, didn't correct her, which meant he agreed. Lynette finally sat down, crossing her legs neatly. "Darren mentioned you might be considering some changes." I tilted my head slightly. "Changes?" "To make things easier," she clarified. "Simplify your responsibilities." Simplify. Another word added to the collection. "I'm thinking about it," I said. She nodded once. "Good. It's important to act before things become complicated." Before, not if. I let my gaze drift, as if I'd lost track of the conversation. "I do get confused sometimes," I murmured. Lynette's eyes sharpened for just a second. There it was again. Expectation. Later, after they left, I checked the house. Not out of fear, out of habit. That's when I noticed the bowl. It sat on the mantel, slightly off-center. A kintsugi bowl, cracked porcelain repaired with gold lacquer. Orson had brought it back from a trip years ago, said it reminded him that broken things could still be made whole. I always kept it aligned with the edge of the frame beside it. Now it was off by an inch. I stepped closer. Inside the bowl, beneath the decorative filler stones, something small caught the light. Metal. I reached in carefully and pulled it out. A tiny listening device. Not mine. I held it in my palm for a long moment, turning it slightly between my fingers. So, they were recording too. Not just observing, not just guiding, collecting. I placed it back exactly where I found it, adjusted the bowl to its original position, and smiled. Because that changed everything. Now, it wasn't just my word, it was a conversation. And conversations, when recorded from both sides, have a way of revealing the truth. I walked back to the kitchen, took out my recorder, and placed it gently on the counter. Then just loud enough to be heard. "I really don't know what I'd do without them," I said. A pause. "And I trust them completely." Let them hear that. Let them believe it. Because the more they believed they had control, the less careful they would become. And careless people make the best evidence. Sunday dinners used to mean something in this house. Orson would carve the roast himself, always too carefully, like the meat might argue back if he rushed it. I'd handle the sides, usually something simple, rosemary potatoes, maybe a light fennel salad with citrus if I felt indulgent. The table would fill with noise, voices overlapping, small disagreements that meant nothing and everything at the same time. Now, it felt like a rehearsal. Darren arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine he didn't intend to open. Maris followed, with Corbin trailing behind her, already half checked out of the evening. Lynette came last, precise as always, her heels clicking against the floor like punctuation. And then there was Willa. She stepped in quietly, offering me a real smile. Not polite, not measured. Real. "Hi, Grandma." "Hello, darling." She hugged me, properly. Not carefully, not like I might break. That alone told me she hadn't fully joined their version of things. Dinner began smoothly. Too smoothly. Darren took control of the conversation, guiding it from topic to topic, like a man steering something fragile through narrow water. Maris added details where needed. Lynette observed. Corbin just ate. Willa watched. I let myself drift slightly in and out, just enough to reinforce what they already believed. At one point, Darren set down his fork and looked at me. "Mom, do you remember the appointment we talked about for next week?" There it was, a test. I tilted my head, blinking slowly. "Appointment?" "With the consultant," Maris added quickly. "About your living arrangements." I let a pause stretch. Counted. 1, 2, 3. "I don't think you told me about that," I said softly. Darren exchanged a glance with Maris. "We did, Mom. Yesterday." Willa shifted slightly in her chair. "I was here yesterday," she said, calm but clear. "You didn't mention anything." Silence. Just for a second. Darren smiled, but it was thinner now. "We must have talked about it after you left." Willa didn't respond, but she didn't look convinced either. Good. The rest of dinner continued, but something had shifted. Not enough for them to panic, but enough for them to start paying closer attention again. After dessert, Maurice's version of my galette, still too sweet this time. Willa followed me into the kitchen. She didn't speak immediately, just helped rinse the plates. Her movements quiet, deliberate. Then, softly, "They're doing something, aren't they?" I kept my eyes on the sink. "What makes you say that?" She hesitated. "Because they keep setting things up. Conversations, situations, and then acting like they already know how you'll respond." Smart girl. I dried my hands slowly. "And what do you think that means?" Willa looked at me then, really looked. "I think they want something." I met her gaze. "Yes," I said. "They do?" A pause. She lowered her voice. "Are you okay?" There it was. Not, "Are you confused?" Not, "Do you remember?" "Are you okay?" I nodded once. "I am." That was all I gave her. Not because I didn't trust her, but because this wasn't her fight yet. Before she left, she touched my arm lightly. "If you need anything at all, call me." "I will," I said. And I meant it. After everyone was gone, I returned to the living room. The house felt different again. Not staged this time. Watched. I walked to the mantel, adjusted the kintsugi bowl just slightly, enough to confirm what I already knew. The device was still there, still active. Good. I sat down in Orson's chair and let out a slow breath. Then I reached for my recorder, clicked it on, and spoke clearly, calmly, like I was thinking out loud. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm forgetting things, or if someone wants me to believe I am." A pause. "Long enough?" "I suppose it doesn't matter. Not if I have people to guide me." Let them hear that. Let them think I was leaning in. Because the more I leaned, the more they would push. And people who push too far eventually lose their balance. 2 days later, Maris called me just after noon. Her tone was lighter than usual, too light. "Mom, I thought we could go out for lunch," she said. "Just us. Somewhere nice." Just us. I agreed, because when someone who is building something suddenly softens, It means they're about to show you the next step. She picked me up at 1:30. The car smelled faintly of citrus and something sharper underneath. Nervous energy, if that had a scent. "You'll like this place," she said as we drove. "It's calm, comfortable." Comfortable. We didn't go into town. We drove past it, further, out toward the edge of Greywick, where the roads widen and the houses begin to disappear behind gates and hedges. That's when I saw the sign. Briarfield House. Of course. "Just lunch," Maris said quickly, as if reading the thought on my face. "They have a wonderful restaurant." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure they do." Inside, everything was designed to feel gentle. Soft lighting, pale colors. The faint sound of a piano somewhere in the distance, playing something slow and forgettable. People moved quietly here, too quietly, like noise itself was discouraged. A woman approached us almost immediately. "Mrs. Kestrel," she said warmly, "we've been expecting you." There it was again. Expecting. I turned slightly toward Maris. She didn't meet my eyes. "Just lunch," she repeated softly. "Of course it is." We were led through a hallway, past open doors where residents sat in arranged comfort. Books open but unread, televisions on but unwatched. A few looked up as we passed. Not curious, just present. The dining room was immaculate. White linens, small vases with single stems. Controlled beauty? Darren was already there. Of course he was. "Mom," he said, standing quickly, "you made it." Made it. Like I had completed something. We sat. Orders were placed for me before I could speak. Poached salmon, steamed vegetables, chamomile tea, always chamomile. I let it happen. Across the table, a man joined us. Late 50s, polished, measured. "Mrs. Kestrel, I'm Adrian Solis," he said. "I oversee admissions here at Briarfield." Admissions, not lunch. I nodded politely. "A pleasure." He smiled. "Your children have told me a great deal about you." I glanced at Darren. He didn't look away this time. "Good. And what have they told you?" I asked. A small pause. "Just that they're concerned," Adrian said smoothly, "and that they want to ensure you're comfortable moving forward." Moving forward. Always forward. Never back. "I see," I said. The food arrived. Perfectly arranged. Tasteless. While I ate, Adrian spoke about services, support, independence framed in soft limitations, walking paths, supervised activities, gentle assistance. I listened, but I also watched. Watched Darren's posture. Watched Maris's hands. Watched the way Adrian's eyes flicked toward them before answering certain questions. This wasn't a conversation. It was a presentation. At one point, I set my fork down. "And how much does all of this cost?" I asked. Adrian smiled, but this time, it tightened slightly. "That depends on the level of care required." "Let's assume," I said calmly, "that I'm capable of making my own decisions. What would it cost then?" A pause. Darren shifted. Maris inhaled quietly. Adrian adjusted his cuff. "Well," he said, "in that case, we'd be looking at a base package." "Paid by whom?" I asked. That did it. The smoothness cracked, just a little. Darren leaned forward. "Mom, we'll handle all that. You don't need to worry about the details." There it was again. Don't worry. Don't think. Don't ask. I picked up my tea. Chamomile, still warm. "I've always handled my own details," I said softly. Silence. Short. Controlled. Then Adrian recovered. "Of course, Mrs. Kestrel, and you would continue to have a voice in your care." A voice, not control. Important distinction. We finished lunch without further disruption. Smiles returned. Politeness resumed. But the mask had slipped. Just enough. On the way out, Darren walked slightly ahead, speaking quietly with Adrian. Maris stayed beside me. You liked it, didn't you? She asked. I took my time answering. It's very organized, I said. She nodded quickly. That's what you need now. Structure. Need, not want. We reached the car. Before getting in, I turned back once more and looked at Briarfield House. Clean, quiet, controlled, prepared. They had already chosen it, already planned it, already placed me inside it in their minds. As we drove home, Darren finally said it. We're just trying to do what's best for you, Mom. I looked out the window. Yes, I said. I can see that. And I could. Perfectly. That evening, back in my house, I went straight to Orson's study. Opened the Lavender Ledger. Day 8. Briarfield visit confirmed. Pre-arranged admission. Financial deflection when questioned. They assume control is imminent. I closed the notebook slowly. Then I reached for the recorder, clicked it on, and said clearly, they've already decided where I belong. A pause. Long enough. I wonder if they've decided what to do with everything I leave behind. Let them hear that. Let them think I was accepting it. Because acceptance is the most dangerous illusion of all. They didn't wait long after Briarfield. 3 days, to be exact. That's how long it took for concern to turn into action. Darren called first. Calm voice. Controlled pace. Mom, we think it's time we all sit down together. Properly. Just to talk things through. Talk things through. I agreed before he finished the sentence. Because this was the next step Harlan warned me about. And I was ready. They arrived in the afternoon. All of them. Darren, Maris, Lynette. Even Corbin, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And one more. Someone new. A woman in her 40s. Sharp suit. Leather folder. Mom, this is Evelyn Price, Darren said. She's a care consultant. Consultant, not lawyer. Not yet. But close enough. We sat in the living room. Not the kitchen this time. Not the familiar space. No. This was arranged. Chairs positioned. Table cleared. Papers already laid out before I even sat down. Prepared. Evelyn Price spoke first. Smooth. Practiced. Mrs. Kestrel, your children have asked me to help facilitate a discussion about your current situation and future care needs. Future. Always ahead of me. I folded my hands in my lap. I see. She opened her folder. Pages. Notes. Structured. We're here to make sure your transition is as comfortable and respectful as possible. Transition. Not question. Not option. Decision. Darren leaned forward. Mom, we've been worried for a while now. The memory issues, the confusion, the incidents at home. Which incidents? I asked quietly. A pause. Short. Then Maris stepped in. The stove, the misplaced items, the missed details. You know what we mean. I nodded slowly. Of course I did. Evelyn Price continued, unbothered. Based on everything I've reviewed, I would recommend a structured environment. Somewhere like Briarfield House would be ideal. Ideal. For whom? She slid a document toward me. This would allow your son to assist with decision-making temporarily, just until stability is restored. Temporary, the most permanent word people use. I didn't touch the paper. Darren's voice softened. Mom, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just want to help. Help. Again. Always help. Lynette spoke for the first time. Delaying this will only make things harder. For everyone. There it was. Pressure, not loud, but present. I looked around the room, at each of them. Darren, certain. Maris, tense. Lynette, calculating. Corbin, silent. Evelyn Price, detached. All aligned, all waiting for me to give them permission. This right here, this is the moment everything tilts. They've brought in an outsider, papers ready, voices calm. But look closer. This isn't concern anymore. This is a setup. So tell me, if you were sitting in that chair, surrounded like this, would you fight back right now or keep playing along? Me? I'd wait. Let them talk. People always say too much when they think they've already won. I lowered my gaze, let silence stretch. Then, I don't want to be a burden, I said quietly. Relief, instant, visible. Darren exhaled. Maris's shoulders dropped. Even Lynette leaned back slightly. They thought that was it. The moment. I continued, letting my voice soften further. I need to understand what I'm signing. Evelyn Price smiled. Of course. She began explaining, carefully, selectively. I listened, but not to the explanation, to the details she skipped, to the parts she simplified, to the way Darren interrupted when something became too specific. That was where the truth lived. And this allows you to manage my accounts? I asked. Yes, Darren said quickly, just temporarily. And the house? A flicker. Just a flicker. We'd maintain it, Maris said. Make sure everything is taken care of. Taken care of. I nodded slowly. Then I did something very small. I reached for the pen. Every eye in the room followed the movement. Every breath held. I held the pen between my fingers, let it hover above the paper, paused, counted. 1, 2, 3. Then I set it down. I can't, I said softly. The shift was immediate, not explosive, but sharp. Darren leaned forward. Mom, why not? I need one more day, I said. Just one. To think clearly. Lynette's eyes narrowed slightly. Evelyn Price closed her folder halfway. Maurice looked at Darren. That silent exchange again. Faster this time. Tighter. Darren forced a smile. Okay. One day. But his voice had changed. Less confident, more urgent. Good. Because urgency leads to mistakes. They gathered their papers. Not as neatly this time, not as controlled. When they left, Darren lingered at the door. Don't overthink this, Mom, he said. It's the right decision. I met his eyes. Yes, I said. I'm starting to see that. He left. The door closed, and for the first time since this began, I felt it. The edge of the turning point. I walked back into the living room. Looked at the chair where I had been sitting, the space where they had surrounded me, and then I reached for my recorder, clicked it on, and spoke clearly. They're not asking anymore. A pause. They're preparing. I set the recorder down and smiled, because now they were close enough to losing that they would stop being careful. The next morning, I didn't wait for them. That was important. Up until now, every move had been theirs. Every visit, every conversation, every carefully staged concern. I had reacted, adjusted, observed. Not anymore. At 9:15, I called a taxi. Not because I couldn't drive, but because Darren had started asking too many questions about where I went, when I left, how long I stayed. Small things, casual tone, patterns. So I removed myself from the pattern. The driver didn't speak much. Young man, tired eyes, the faint smell of burnt coffee lingering in the car. He dropped me off 2 blocks from the bank, just as I asked. I walked the rest. Slowly. Naturally, like a woman who had nowhere urgent to be. Inside, the air was cool, controlled, familiar. I had been banking here longer than Darren had been alive. Nola Vint was already at her desk. She looked up as I approached, and for just a second, her expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. Mrs. Kestrel, she said, standing. Good to see you. And you, Nola. We didn't waste time. Her office door closed softly behind us. I assume this isn't a social visit, she said. No, I replied. It isn't. I explained everything. Not emotionally, not dramatically, fact by fact. The conversations, the forms, the attempt to establish control, the subtle manipulations, the doctor, the consultant, the pressure. And then, the account access attempts? She asked, before I even got there. I paused. Yes, I said. She nodded once, already turning to her screen. We flagged unusual inquiries yesterday. Someone tried to verify your identity using outdated security responses. Darren. Too early. Too eager. Mistake. I told your staff to deny everything unless I confirm in person, I said. They did, she replied. And we've added an internal alert. No changes, no transfers, no access, without you physically present and verified. Good. That bought me time. I'll also need copies, I added, of any attempted access. Dates, times, everything. You'll have them by the end of the day. Efficient, reliable, exactly why Orson trusted her. Before I left, I made one more change, not large, but decisive. I want a secondary lock on my safety deposit box, I said. Dual authorization. Nola looked at me carefully. Understood. No questions. That mattered. By the time I stepped back onto the street, the air felt different, not lighter, sharper, because now the line had been crossed. They weren't just preparing anymore. They were acting, and that meant the window was closing. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I walked 2 streets over and sat on a bench near the old pharmacy. The one with the chipped green sign and the bell that rings too loudly when you open the door. I took out Dr. Vale's card, turned it between my fingers. Then I called. He answered on the second ring. Dr. Vale. It's Evelyn Kestrel. A pause. I was hoping you'd call, he said. I need documentation, I told him. Formal, clear. You'll have it, he replied. No hesitation. But I'll ask again. Are you safe? I looked out at the street. People passing, conversations overlapping, ordinary life continuing as if nothing had shifted. I am, I said, then added carefully, but they're going to try something soon. Another pause, longer this time. Then we move carefully, he said, and we make sure when they do. It's the last move they get. When. Again, not if. We ended the call shortly after that. I sat there for a few more minutes, thinking, timing. Everything now depended on timing. When to let them act, when to stop them, when to show what I had. Too early, and they would retreat. Too late, and they might succeed. I stood up slowly and made my way back home. The house greeted me the same way it always had, quiet, still. But now I knew exactly what lived inside that quiet. Waiting. I went straight to the living room, to the mantel, to the kintsugi bowl. The device was still there, still listening. Good. I didn't remove it. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, placed my bag down, and spoke. Clear, tired, just loud enough. I don't think I can manage all of this anymore. A pause. Let it breathe. Maybe they're right. Then I turned away. Let the silence carry it. Because somewhere, someone was listening. And now, they would move faster. Exactly what I needed. Maris came alone that evening. That by itself was new. No Darren. No Lynette. No coordinated timing. No second set of eyes reinforcing the same narrative. Just her. Standing in the doorway with a small box in her hands and something uncertain behind her expression. Hi, Mom, she said. Come in. She stepped inside slowly, like she wasn't entirely sure she belonged there. The box turned out to be a pear galette. Not mine. Not even close. Too glossy. Too precise. Store-bought, pretending to be homemade. You didn't have to bring anything, I said. I know, she replied. I just thought it would be nice. Nice. We moved into the kitchen. No setup this time, no documents, no consultant. Just 2 chairs, the same table, the same space that used to mean something before everything became strategic. She sat across from me, folding and unfolding her hands. I've been thinking, she started. I didn't interrupt. That's the thing about silence. It makes people fill it. About everything, she added. About what Darren's been saying. About Briarfield. About you. I poured tea. Not chamomile this time. Black tea. Strong. She noticed. Didn't comment. I know this hasn't been easy, she continued, but we're just trying to figure out what's best. Best. Always best. For whom? I asked quietly. That caught her. Not enough to stop her, but enough to slow her down. For you, she said. For everyone. Everyone. I nodded slightly, then waited. She looked at me for a long moment. Really looked this time, not scanning, not measuring, searching. And for a second, just a second, the mask slipped. I don't like how fast this is moving, she said suddenly. There it was. Small, but real. I didn't react. Didn't lean in, just let it sit. Darren says we don't have a choice, she continued. That if we wait, things could get worse. That we need to act before... She stopped. Before what? I asked. She swallowed. Before you can't... Before it's too late. Too late? I tilted my head slightly. Do you believe that? The question landed heavier than she expected. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands. I don't know what I believe anymore, she said quietly. There it was. The crack. Not in the plan. In her. Darren's under a lot of pressure, she added quickly, like she needed to justify something. Things aren't going well for him right now. Lynette's business... She stopped again. Too late. I had it. What about Lynette's business? I asked. Maris shook her head. It's nothing, just financial stuff. Financial? Of course. Everything circles back to that eventually. He says the house would solve a lot of problems, she said, almost under her breath. There it was. Finally. Not concern. Not safety. Solution? My house. Their answer. I didn't speak. Didn't move. Just let her realize what she had said. Her eyes widened slightly. Too late. Again. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. It's not just about the house. But it is, I said calmly. Silence. Heavy this time. Real. She looked at me like she was seeing something new. Or maybe something she'd been trying not to see. We thought, she started, then stopped. We thought what? I asked. That you wouldn't notice, she said. Honest. For the first time. I nodded once. That makes things easier, I replied. For you? She asked. No, I said. For me. She didn't understand that yet. But she would. Soon. She stood up slowly, like the conversation had shifted somewhere she couldn't follow. I should go, she said. Yes, I replied. At the door, she hesitated. Mom? I waited. I didn't start this, she said. No, she didn't. But she didn't stop it either. I know, I said. That was all. She left. The door closed. And for a long moment, I stood there in the quiet. Then I walked into the living room, to the mantel, to the kintsugi bowl. Still there. Still listening. Good. I didn't touch it. Instead, I turned slightly, just enough, and spoke, clear and measured. So that's what this is about. A pause. The house? I let the words settle. Let them travel. Let whoever was listening hear exactly what I wanted them to hear. Then I added, softer. I don't think they realize how much trouble they're already in. Because they didn't? Not yet. But they were getting closer. Every word, every move, every mistake. And now, they were starting to turn on each other. That was when things usually collapsed. Darren didn't call this time. He showed up. Early. Too early for anything that could be called normal. 7 in the morning, and he wasn't knocking. He was hitting the door hard enough to wake the neighbors. "Mom, open the door!" I didn't rush. That was important. I walked down the hallway at my usual pace, steady, controlled, and only opened the door after the 3rd round of pounding. He looked different, not composed, not careful. Wrinkled shirt, eyes red, jaw tight. Whatever had been holding him together before was slipping. "You went to the bank," he said immediately, pushing past me. Not a question, a statement. I closed the door behind him. "Good morning, Darren." "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't act like everything's fine." I walked into the kitchen, put the kettle on. Routine, always routine. "You tried to access my accounts," I said calmly. Silence. "Then I was trying to help," he said, but the tone was wrong now, too fast, too sharp. "No," I replied. "You weren't." He stepped closer. "You don't understand how these things work anymore. There are risks, mistakes. I was protecting you." Protecting, still using the word. Even now. I turned to face him. By pretending to be me? That landed. Hard. He hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. "They told me at the bank," I continued. "Outdated answers. Incorrect verification." His expression shifted, anger pushing past control. "They shouldn't have told you anything," he muttered. There it was. Not regret, not concern, annoyance. Because he had been caught. "They didn't," I said quietly. I asked. A pause. Longer this time. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the kitchen. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "If you would just sign the papers, none of this would be necessary." Necessary. That word again. I watched him carefully. This was the moment Harlan had been waiting for. When pressure replaces patience. When control starts to crack. "I told you," I said. "I need time." "You don't have time," he snapped. Silence. Sharp. Clean. There it was. Not concern. Urgency. Real urgency. "Why not?" I asked. He stopped pacing. Looked at me. Really looked this time. And for a moment, I saw it. Fear. Not for me. For himself. "That's not the point," he said quickly. No. But it was. I let the silence stretch again. He couldn't hold it. Not anymore. "You think you're fine," he continued, voice lower now, controlled again, but barely. "You think you can manage everything, but you can't. You're forgetting things. You're making mistakes. And if something happens, if you lose control, we'll be the ones dealing with it. We. Not me. Not you. We." I nodded slowly. "I see." "You don't," he said. "That's the problem." No, it wasn't. But he needed to believe that. I turned back to the kettle just as it began to whistle, sharp, off-key, cutting through the tension. I poured the water, set 2 cups, offered him one. He didn't take it. Of course he didn't. "I spoke to someone," he said suddenly. I paused. "Someone," I repeated. "A lawyer," he said. There it was. Finally. Escalation. "We're filing a petition," he continued. "Emergency review, competency evaluation." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Or at least, he thought they were. "And if the court agrees," he added, "we can move forward properly. Without all this resistance." properly. That word almost made me smile. I set the cup down, turned to him fully. And if they don't? I asked. He didn't answer immediately, because he hadn't thought that far. Or maybe he didn't want to. They will, he said finally. Confidence. Forced. Fragile. I nodded once. Then I suppose, I said softly, we'll let them decide. That unsettled him. He expected fear. Panic, not acceptance, not calm. You're not taking this seriously, he said. I looked at him. Long. Steady. I am, I replied. More than you know. He exhaled sharply, frustrated now. This didn't have to go this way, he muttered. No, it didn't. But he had chosen it. He turned and walked toward the door. Stopped. One way or another, he said without turning back, this is happening. The door opened, closed, and just like that, it was no longer quiet. Not really, because now, everything was in motion. I stood there for a moment, then walked slowly into the living room, to the mantel, to the kintsugi bowl. Still there, still listening. Good. I didn't remove it, not yet. Instead, I reached for my recorder, clicked it on, and said clearly, he's made his move. A pause. He thinks it's over. I let the silence stretch, then added, it hasn't even begun. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and old paper. Clean, controlled, predictable, unlike everything that had led us there. I arrived early. That mattered. Not because I needed the time, but because they didn't expect it. Darren was already inside, pacing near the front with his lawyer. Maris sat beside them, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lynette stood slightly apart, speaking quietly into her phone before slipping it into her bag the moment she saw me. All of them looked up at once, and for the first time, they weren't confident. Good. I took my seat calmly, placing my bag beside me, hands resting neatly on top of it. No shaking, no hesitation, just presence. Harlan arrived a few minutes later. Same as always, unhurried, observant, precise. He didn't greet them. He greeted me. Evelyn. Harlan. That was enough. The judge entered shortly after. Naomi Calder. Late 50s, sharp eyes, the kind of stillness that doesn't miss anything. Everyone stood, then sat, and just like that, it began. Darren's lawyer spoke first. Of course, smooth voice, structured argument, carefully arranged concern. She has shown signs of cognitive decline over the past months, he said. Memory lapses, confusion, inability to manage daily responsibilities. My clients are simply seeking to ensure her safety and well-being. Safety. Well-being. The same words, repackaged, repeated, made to sound reasonable. Maris nodded at the right moments. Darren kept his expression controlled, serious, just concerned enough to appear believable. Lynette didn't react at all. She didn't need to. Then came the examples. The stove, the misplaced items, the missed appointments. Each one presented like a small, harmless detail. Individually insignificant. Together. A pattern. Or at least, that was the idea. I sat still. Said nothing. Let them build it. Let them stack their careful little lies into something that looked like truth. Because the higher it stood, the harder it would fall. When they finished, the courtroom felt quiet. Satisfied. Like something had been proven. That's when Harlan stood. No rush, no theatrics, just a shift in the air. Your Honor, he said, before we proceed further, I would like to introduce a series of recorded conversations. A pause. Darren's head turned sharply. Maris froze. Lynette's posture changed, just slightly. Recordings? The judge asked. Yes, Harlan replied. 6 months worth. 6 months. That landed. Hard. Harlan nodded toward me. I opened my bag, took out the small device, placed it on the table. Simple, unremarkable, deadly. The first recording began. Darren's voice filled the room. Calm, controlled, familiar. We need to move faster. Silence, no context, just the words, then another. Maris's voice this time. She probably doesn't even remember doing it. Another, Darren again. Need signature ASAP. A shift in the room. Subtle, but real. Now this is where everything breaks. All that calm, all that confidence. They didn't expect this. 6 months of their own words turned against them. Tell me, what would you do if the people calling you confused suddenly had to hear themselves clearly in front of everyone? Me? I'd sit exactly like Evelyn, and I'd let it play. The recordings continued, one by one, carefully selected, precisely timed, no shouting, no drama, just truth, unfiltered, undeniable. Then came the one that mattered most, Darren's voice, clear, sharp. The house would solve everything. Silence, heavy, irreversible. Maris's voice followed. We just need to make it believable. That did it. Not loud, not explosive, but final. The judge leaned back slightly, her expression no longer neutral. Darren shifted in his seat, his composure cracking for the first time. That's not, he started. Sit down, his lawyer whispered. Too late, because now they weren't presenting a case anymore. They were defending themselves. Harlan stepped forward again. Your Honor, he said calmly, these recordings demonstrate not cognitive decline, but coordinated manipulation. No embellishment, no exaggeration, just the truth. And for the first time since this began, the room saw it. Clearly. I sat there, hands still, eyes forward. Not triumphant. Not emotional, just present. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about being seen. And now, they finally saw me. The silence after the recordings ended wasn't empty. It was heavy. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for explanation, because it already has one. Judge Calder didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. Her eyes moved from the device on the table, to Darren, to Mary's, and then back to me, measured, deliberate. Darren's lawyer stood, adjusting his jacket too quickly. Your Honor, these recordings lack context. Selective excerpts can... Sit down, the judge said. Not loud, not sharp, just final. He sat. Darren leaned forward, his composure hanging by a thread now. Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. Calm, steady. For the first time in that room, he didn't interrupt me, because he couldn't. The judge turned slightly toward Harlan. Do you have additional documentation? Yes, Your Honor, Harlan replied, already stepping forward. Medical evaluation from Dr. Soren Vale, full cognitive assessment, no signs of impairment consistent with the claims presented. He placed the document on the bench. Clean, clear, official. The judge reviewed it in silence. Then, and the bank records? She asked. Harlan nodded. Submitted as well. Attempted unauthorized access by Mr. Darren Kestrel. Flagged and documented. That landed differently. Sharper. Because now it wasn't just manipulation. It was action. Darren shook his head immediately. That's not... I was trying to protect. By impersonating her? The judge asked, looking directly at him. Silence. Again. But this time, it broke him. I was trying to fix things, he snapped, louder than he intended. You don't understand what was at stake. There it was. Not concern, not care. Desperation. What exactly was at stake, Mr. Kestrel? The judge asked. He hesitated. Too long. Maris closed her eyes. Lynette looked away. Because they all knew. There was no answer that wouldn't expose everything. Harlan didn't step in. Didn't need to. They were doing the work themselves now. Finally, Darren muttered, "Financial pressure. Things weren't stable." "Your finances," the judge clarified. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The room already knew. Maris spoke next. Quiet, barely above a whisper. "We didn't think it would go this far." The judge turned to her. "And how far did you think it would go?" Maris didn't answer. Because now she could hear it too. Every word they had said, every plan they had made, played back, clear, permanent. The judge leaned back slightly, folding her hands. "The petition for competency review is denied," she said. Just like that. No build-up, no hesitation. Denied. Darren's shoulders dropped. Maris looked down. Lynette remained still, but her control was gone now. You could see it in the tension along her jaw. Judge Calder continued. "Based on the evidence presented, Mrs. Evelyn Kestrel is fully competent to manage her affairs. Furthermore," she paused just briefly, "I strongly advise all parties to reconsider any further attempts to interfere with her autonomy." Advise. A polite word, with weight behind it. Then her gaze sharpened. "Because the next review may not be civil." That was the warning. Clear enough. Final enough. The hearing was over. People began to move. Papers gathered. Chairs shifted. But for a moment, no one from my family stood. They stayed exactly where they were. Like if they didn't move, this wouldn't be real. Darren finally looked at me. Really looked. Not as a mother. Not as someone weak. But as someone who had just undone everything he tried to build. "We could have handled this differently," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "Yes," I replied. "We could have. But we didn't." Maris stood slowly. Her voice was softer now. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Late. Incomplete. I nodded once. Not acceptance, just acknowledgement. Lynette didn't say anything. Of course she didn't. She was already calculating the next move, or realizing there wasn't one. I gathered my things. Slowly, carefully, no rush. Because for the first time in months, there was nothing chasing me. Nothing closing in. Nothing being taken. As I walked past them toward the exit, Darren spoke one last time. "This isn't over." I stopped, just for a second, then turned slightly. "It is," I said. And this time, he didn't argue. Because somewhere, deep down, he knew it was true. The house felt different when I came back. Not because anything had changed, but because everything had. I unlocked the door myself. No one standing behind me. No one watching how I held the key, how long it took, whether I hesitated. I stepped inside, closed the door. And for the first time in months, the silence belonged to me again. I didn't rush to sit down, didn't reach for the recorder, didn't check the rooms. I walked through the house slowly, touching things as I passed. The edge of the hallway table. The back of Orson's chair. The frame of the old photograph near the stairs. The one where Darren and Maris were still small enough to fit under my arms at the same time. I stopped there for a moment. Looked at it. Not with anger. Not even with disappointment. Just clarity. Then I moved on, into the living room, to the mantel, to the kintsugi bowl. It was still there. Exactly where it had been. Exactly where they had left it. I picked it up carefully this time, turned it over in my hands, felt the weight of it, the gold lines where it had once been broken. Then I reached inside and took the device out. Small. Cold. Useless now. I held it between my fingers for a moment, then placed it on the table. Not hidden, not returned. Finished. I didn't say anything to it. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I walked into Orson's study, opened the lockbox, took out the final documents. Over the next week, everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, precisely. Harlan handled the legal structure. Clean revisions, no loopholes, no ambiguity. Darren and Maris were removed from every position of control, financial, medical, legal, completely. The house stayed in my name, untouchable. The accounts were secured, the access points sealed. Then came the decisions that mattered more. I set up a trust, not for them, for Willa. Education, security, freedom. No conditions except one: she would never be made to feel like she owed it. Because that's where everything had gone wrong. I also established something else. Small, but intentional. The Orson Kestrel Fund. For people like me. People who were told they were fading when they weren't. People who needed time, voice, proof. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. Darren called, more than once. I didn't answer. Maris wrote. Letters, messages, apologies. I read them. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some things take time. Not to forgive, but to understand what forgiveness would even mean. One afternoon, Willa came by. She didn't ask questions at first, just sat with me on the porch, 2 cups of tea between us. Not chamomile. Something stronger. Something real. You look different, she said after a while. Do I? She nodded. Lighter. I thought about that, then smiled, just slightly. I think I am. We sat there for a long time. No pressure, no performance. Just quiet. The kind that doesn't hide anything. Later that evening, after she left, I went back inside. Sat in Orson's chair. Looked around the room. Everything was the same, but nothing was. I reached for the recorder one last time, held it in my hand, turned it on, and spoke. Not for them, not for evidence, just for myself. They thought I was disappearing, I said quietly. A pause. I was just watching. I turned it off, set it down, and left it there, because I didn't need it anymore. The next morning came like any other. Light through the curtains, the kettle beginning to warm, the house breathing around me. And for the first time in a long while, there was nothing waiting behind it. No plan, no pressure, no voices trying to rewrite my life. Just me. Exactly where I belonged. All right, my dears. This is where I stand on it. What they did, there's no excuse for it. Not age, not stress, not money. If I were in her place, I'd do exactly what she did. Protect myself first, then decide later who deserves to come back into my life, if anyone at all. You don't owe access to people who tried to take everything from you. If you've made it this far, subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, would you ever forgive them?